El Chapo and El Rapido are nicknames that have been given to this individual, Juanelo Guzman Lora. In the state of New York, he is being investigated for several offenses, including those involving drugs and a possible murder conspiracy. In the middle of the 1980s, he began his career as a criminal. He was a middle-level operative for the Cartel gang and became well known for how rapidly he smuggled drugs from Mexico to the United States. This earned him a reputation in the criminal underworld. Because of this, he was given the nickname El Rapido after he escaped from a Mexican prison in 2001 by concealing himself in a laundry cart. As a result of his close working relationship with the absconding co-defendant, Ismael Zambada Garcia, Guzman Lora rose to the position of most influential member of the Cartel cartel. On the other hand, he was apprehended in 2016 and then extradited to the United States the year after that so that he could be tried for his crimes there. After a 3-month trial, a federal jury decided on February 12, 2019, that Guzman Lora was guilty of the charges against him. The evidence that was presented throughout the trial was compelling, and there were a total of 14 witnesses that testified. Getting along together in court, former members of the Cartel gang testified that El Chapo's criminal activities were of a particularly heinous nature. The behavior and the tactics used by Guzman Lora and his colleagues to import drugs into the United States were displayed as evidence during the trial. You won't believe the behavior that was shown. Smuggled drugs into the United States by utilizing fishing boats, submarines, carbon fiber planes, trains with secret compartments, and even transnational underground tunnels. As soon as they arrived at their destination, they were distributed to wholesale dealers in cities all around the nation. For his role as a prominent commander of the Cartel cartel, El Chapo was handed a sentence of life in prison, plus an additional 30 years for serving time. In addition to that, he was ordered to make a large forfeiture payment of $12.6 billion. The notoriously evil El Chapo. The stunning answer that El Chapo had to the news of his sentence was that it did not compare to the situation that George Geld was in. He did not show any signs of emotion when it was being read. Thomas is undeniably one of the most deadly gang bosses in South Africa. There is no doubt about that. A Gelden named George people having the name Thomas strike fear in the hearts of others, even members of opposing gangs. Thomas didn't just pick the name Geld because he thought it sounded cool. His name actually means something violent. It's possible that Thomas House is being used as a meeting place for other gang leaders to plot murders or robberies, where they conceal themselves but are not Thomas. The terrifying gang leader plotted around 4 murders from within the detention center. Thomas was charged with almost 50 offenses, the most serious of which were 7 homicides, a total of 3 failed attempts to kill, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition, breaking into residences with the intention of robbing them, and robbery with aggravating circumstances, in addition to various counts relating to gang activity. He was sentenced to life in prison for each of the 7 murders that he was accused of committing. 3 of the 7 people were killed as a direct result of Thomas' actions, and he was responsible for the planning and execution of the other 4 killings from his jail cell. However, he was not the only one who was condemned to life in jail for their crimes. 6 other members of his gang were also given life terms for their involvement in the atrocities. While Thomas was inside bars, he assisted in the commission of a number of these offenses, including those listed above. The prison terms that were handed down to the other defendants ranged anywhere from 12 to 25 years each. The state fulfilled its obligation to in part by the arrest and conviction of the suspect. Putting an end to gang activity and organized crime must be a key priority. The destruction of the state was caused by 2 of the most vicious gangs in the country, the 26 and the 28s. The trial started in 2010 and investigated the crimes that occurred at the location. More than 150 charges have been filed against the individuals accused of committing gang crimes that occurred between the years 1999 and 2010. Thomas's worry was not unwarranted in any way. There are 12 people with ties to the investigation, and 6 of them are suspects. It shouldn't have come as a surprise when the public gallery was pulled out because state witnesses have been murdered. Only reporters were present in the courtroom as terrified witnesses, who were each escorted by a bodyguard, testified that gangs had repeatedly attempted to kill Curtis Esterhuizen, a member of the rival Clever Kids group. Only reporters were present in the courtroom. Thomas was taken into custody during the aftermath of one of these shootings. More than 30,000 individuals, including witnesses, were killed as a direct result of the orders that he gave over the phone from behind bars as he awaited his sentencing. Because of the overwhelming amount of evidence, Thomas and his friends spent their whole trials locked up in jail. Thomas did not exhibit any signs of guilt. In fact, he appeared to be smiling during the entire exchange. However, Thomas's actions and response in court exhibited a callous lack of emotion. There is nothing that could possibly prepare you for the infamous case of Orestes Castilla Sanchez, popularly known as Elo, who is being accused with drug trafficking in the city of Brownsville in the state of Texas. Elo presided over the Gulf Cartel and was its boss. In the course of Felipe Calderon's administration, Mexico's war on drugs resulted in the individual in question being one of the country's most wanted criminals. In 2012, Mexican authorities were successful in capturing Gold, and at the time of his arrest, a display of gold-coated firearms and jewelry was presented to the media. Goa served as a law enforcement official in the Mexican border city of Matamoros before he rose to power and became the commander of the Gulf Cartel. After the arrest of the cartel's previous commander, Old Garca, in 2015, he gained control of the organization. The charges against Castilla, who is now 51 years old, included cocaine trafficking. He was extradited to the United States. At the time of his capture, the federal government of the United States was offering a reward of $5 million for information that would lead to the suspect's arrest. According to the Department of Justice, Castilla was responsible for importing about 10,000 kilograms worth of cocaine and 140,000 kilograms worth of marijuana into the United States. The attorney, Jennifer B. Lowry, gave a speech in which she discussed the significance of the case and the satisfaction of knowing that justice has been done for the one in charge, Daniel C. Sim, who works for the Drug Enforcement Administration's Houston office, lauded the collaborative effort that led to K's apprehension along with the efforts of local and federal partners. He emphasized the commitment to going after drug trafficking gangs aggressively and to maintaining the safety of communities. Gaw was sentenced to life in jail after entering a guilty plea in the month of September 2017. It is significant to note that he was sentenced at the same time as Mexico's lower house agreed to grant the army additional influence over the police force until 2028. This was done in an effort to put a stop to the increasing amount of violence. It's possible that Costa was formerly a law enforcement officer, but it doesn't mean that all cartel bosses are upstanding citizens. For instance, in the investigation into the attempted murder of Abel Gallegos, a woman named Simone Duran, who was 28 years old at the time, identified Alonso Quintana as a suspect from a police lineup. She didn't realize that by identifying him as a member of the gang Quintana, she was signing her own death warrant, but she did know that she was signing his death warrant. Renee Rosales and Abel Gallegos are responsible for her kidnapping, as well as her death by several gunshot wounds. After that, Rosales Gallegos doused her body in gasoline and lit her on fire, as if the previous act of cruelty wasn't already horrible enough. Following the completion of investigations, the 3 individuals suspected of murder were apprehended and charged in court with more than 30 witnesses. Numerous pieces of evidence and statements from witnesses. Renee Francisca Rosales was given a prison sentence that exceeded 120 years for her involvement in the crime. Hina, who the authorities claimed was an habitual criminal, was handed a sentence consisting of life in jail plus 160 years, during which she will not be eligible for release. At the time of the murder, Go was also serving federal probation for a total of 6 felony convictions, the same number as Rosales. Abel Candy Gallegos received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole in addition to an additional term. When Abel and his comrades were sentenced 163 years ago, the judge was surprised by how ruthless they had been, yet they did not express any regret for their actions. It doesn't matter how horrific you found the investigation into Diego's case to be. This wasn't the only time police were able to put a vicious killer behind bars. Lee Rios is also being investigated for murder. 2015 in the state of Massachusetts. In the United States, Kenneth Lopez, age 18, was murdered in 2015 by Latin King Street gang members Lee Rios and Jonathan Guada, both of whom were members of the group. Rios believed that in order to satisfy his own ego, he needed to kill Lopez, but wait till you hear the real reason. When Rios finally succeeded in convincing Lopez to leave his home, the two of them rode in a cab to the location where Lopez would meet his end.